Welcome to Draft Sickos, the show where we talk about everybody from the biggest names to the deepest of sleepers in the NBA draft. I am your host, Maxwell Baumbach, and this week I am joined by Logan Adams. You know him from Twitter, where he is at LoganA_NBA, and his Substack, LoganAdamsNBA.substack.com. He is one of my favorite kind of up-and-coming writers and voices in the NBA draft space. Logan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's awesome to be here. First time on a podcast like this, and just very excited to talk hoops with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. You earned it. I've really enjoyed your work. I think you've done a really good job in a couple senses. I think one thing that you deserve a lot of credit for is you've been really just on top of everything. You had a great recap of Carlton Carrington's hot start, liked your work on G League Ignite, and you had a really good piece too early in the year about Star Thompson. And I think doing some really important work in the draft space as far as noting like, hey, here's an evaluation that I struggled with. Here's what I'm learning from it, and things like that. And it's something that we're big on our end, is saying like, hey, here are guys that I got wrong. I look at Jaime Jaquez going off every night, and I'm like, man, probably should have had him higher on my board. So it's important. It's important to be able to do that sort of work. So we're glad to have you here. We're excited for it. Let's get into it with our winners of the week. First off, we're going to lead off talking about Judah Mintz from Syracuse. This is a guy that I've had a bit of a hard time kind of coming to grips with and pinning down as far as what his stock is going to be and where I should be ranking him on my board. Two big games for him this week. First in a game against Oregon, goes off 18 points on 15 shots, 5 assists, 4 steals. He did have 6 turnovers though. And then against Niagara, another 18-point, 4 rebound, 4 assist, 2 steal outing. Judah Mintz is a guy that I feel like, depending on your perspective, you can have a wildly different view on him than a different evaluator. Like, there's a lot of people that I see talk about Judah Mintz and they're like, oh yeah, first round. And there's other people I talk to, they're straight up like, I'm not seeing it. What has been your sort of prospect journey with Judah Mintz? Like, what did you think of him last year? And then what did you think of what you've seen from him so far this season?
I liked him a lot last year. I mean, I had him ranked in my first round on my big board, I believe, at the end of the year. And now I'm kind of at a point where it's like, I think he's still first round, I guess,
Okay.
but I mean, obviously small guard, he's, I think 6'1" or 6'2". It shows up that way on film. But I think he's got all the little small guard traits that you want for somebody that can create at the next level and is going to be able to do things on the ball.
Yeah, I think one thing that really shines from that standpoint is just how tough he is. Like, it showed up last year. And last year, like, I don't want to say it was like a tricky evaluation, because like what he is like pretty straightforward. Like he's a bulldog guard who scores and can pass. But like he didn't shoot it that great last year. Like he didn't take many threes. He was 30.3%. But he got to the free throw line a lot. And this year he's getting the free throw line a ton. He's taking almost 9 free throw attempts per game. Like it's so, and like obviously like we talk about all the time. Like if you're gonna make it as a smaller guard, like you've got to have this, you've got to have that. And like he does have that sort of like, for lack of a better phrase, like the bowling ball body type that you kind of need to have.
He's very like rounded with like those kind of broader shoulders, and I feel like he just loves taking contact.
Yeah, and like he didn't even weigh in that heavy at the combine. Like he plays even like he's one of those guys that I think is probably going to be stronger than you would estimate based on the height and weight. Like he was 6'3" at the combine barefoot, weighed 176 pounds, but like he plays like a dude that weighs 205. Like he's just able to fight his way to his spots time and time again.
I feel like a large part of that is just the momentum he can build when he's getting downhill, because he has such a like lightning quick first step, and when he takes that contact, he's so good. It's like almost like a running back in a way, because like he can take that contact, maintain his handle, and then shift his feet and go in a different direction and get a guy off balance. He'll get to the rim or he'll get fouled.
Yeah, he's done a really good job with that. The rim pressure is like really high. Like he's taken almost 40% of his half court shots at the rim. So when you're talking about guards that have been in that tier, it's been guys like Jalen Suggs and John Morant and De'Aaron Fox. Like it is not common to see a guy get to the rim this level, this frequently, especially at like the high major level. And then the finishing is okay. Like 55.1% is like an okay number for a guard in terms of finishing at the rim. But when you're getting there that often, it becomes a great number. Like if
Yeah.
you know that they have to guard you at the rim and they kind of know to hang back and that's where you want to go, it's really impressive. I do want to see him shoot more from the outside. And the shot, I think, is really important just because he's very low volume from the outside right now. So if he goes up to the NBA level, like I don't think he's a great vertical athlete. Like
No, I don't think so either.
I
He
think
can
it's
get up and dunk on somebody every once in a while, but
yeah, it's not just like a super consistent part of his game. And then when he's at the next level, guys are going to be bigger, they're going to be stronger, they're going to be quicker. So I think it's going to be a little bit harder just to get downhill through determination. And I don't think his handle is like crazy to the point that like he's going to put guys on skates all the time. He's not as slippery someone like Shea is, where it's like he's just going to be able to wiggle his way inside time and time again. So I think it is going to be important to build up the respectability on his jump shot to create gravity coming out toward him. Because right now, if he's just like a go under guy every time at the NBA level, I do think he's going to have a much harder time, especially because his pull up game is pretty poor, like 21% on mid range pull ups, 26% on pull up threes this year. Like he's just straight up not a threat pulling up, but he's been really good off the catch from three this year. Like he's only taken 13, but he's made 7 out of them. And sometimes that's all you need. Like Tyrese Halliburton was like a bad off the dribble shooter.
yeah.
And like it was the off the catch. Like, that's just kind of like what got him inside. How do you feel about the jump shot? Because like low volume guys can be tricky because sometimes it's there and then sometimes they just don't take them because they don't need to. And like he's getting to his spots every time, but like the form concerns me. He's a guy who kind of shoots it off the top of his head. Low
Very
release.
forward on that release too.
Yes. Yeah. It's not like, it's just very like out in front of his body in terms of like where it comes out. I'm just not crazy about it. And I don't know how positive of an outcome he can have without a respectable 3-point shot. So how do you kind of feel about the jumper at this point? Like, do you think it's something that the volume is low because he can't shoot it, or do you think the volume is just low because he likes getting inside?
I think the best part about his like shooting game right now is just the way he can get to kind of those mid-range counters occasionally. Something he did a lot his freshman year. I think it's just because of how I think Syracuse's like paint was just a little more packed his freshman year.
Yeah.
Now it's a little more spaced out. He can get downhill a little more. So he was flashing that mid-range pull-up or that mid-range counter a little bit better. Form-wise, like you said, off the top of his head, he jumps forward a lot. It's almost like little Jordan Clarkson-y or upper body has a lot of context, and it's like it's just not a form that I trust big time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the free throw numbers are either, but
They're
it's something that
solid. They're like 75 and 78. So like not terrible.
not elite either. So,
No.
it's like, but on the bright side, he has flashed that kind of mid-range pull-up, mid-range counter. That's something that I kind of love as an evaluator is the guys who can get to their spots and create, because I feel like that does eventually, as they add weight and as they kind of become a little more nuanced, it will kind of expand beyond the three-point line or just farther out into the mid-range game. But yeah, as a shooter, I do think that it's kind of more, especially from three, I think it's more so just definitely just like a they're going to go under on me every single time because they know that I'm more dangerous getting downhill. So that's just what I'm going to do.
So that kind of turns into my next question, which is then, and like this, like I've been lower on Mintz. Like Mintz is a guy that like I just don't know that I would draft. Part of it's like the measurables. Like I just like guys that are really long, and he's like got a 6'3" wingspan. He's short. I don't know that he can shoot it. If he's not like a 39% 3-point shooter, I don't know that he's good enough to play with the ball in his hands like all the time. Like, and if he's not that, like, I just don't know how high of a ceiling he can have given what the defense is. Cause like right now the defense at the point of attack, I like a lot. I love his hands. Like he's really feisty with his hands, but he is limited in terms of just his size and his ability to stay in front of people, and off ball, he can be kind of a mess. When he's tight and he's making things messy on another small guard, it's fine. but I do think he's going to have a hard time defensively against NBA guards. So then to me, it just becomes like, okay, well, you need to shoot, because if you don't shoot and like you can't have an off ball role, like I guess I'm just not confident in him enough as an outside shooter to be like, yes, a team will let you run the offense all the time. And then if you're a secondary creator or like playing more of that like tertiary role next to somebody else who's leading a good amount of the offense, like, are you going to be as steady as somebody like Monte Morris? Because like, I don't know that he is. And then if you're not, like, are you a guy who plays minutes every single night, or are you like a third guard that gets minutes on occasion? Like that's kind of where I've struggled with him.
It is a little bit of the like Shreve Cooper dilemma, because Shreve Cooper's a guy I liked a lot coming out, and then ever since I've kind of dipped a little bit on that archetype, just because, like you said, it's hard to have an off-ball role when you're small and you can't really spray it from outside. You know, you're not going to be the guy that's cutting and getting it down low. You're going to get swallowed up down low, and if you can't shoot it, you're kind of just putting one more on the ball defensively.
Yeah, and if I'm gonna play somebody who can't shoot, why wouldn't I play a guy who's like 6'8" and can't shoot? Like, why?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And like, yeah, like that's just where it gets really kind of dicey for him, I feel like. But it's one of those things where it's tricky too, because I don't want to be like, well, just shoot more threes, because it's like, well, for winning college basketball games, like it's probably best that he keeps playing the way that he is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like he's going to be a real, just kind of tricky evaluation. So I like right now, I don't have him in my top 60, which I know is like kind of outrageous depending on who you ask, but would you say he's like kind of like more fringe first round for you?
Fringe first round, early second. It's something that I'm going to have to see later on, because there were stretches his freshman year where he did take, I think, 4 or 5 threes a game going down the stretch, which was like, and he produced when he was taking 4 or 5 threes a game too. So if he can kind of get more of that, or even up the volume a little bit down the stretch of this season, it's going to kind of determine whether or not he's that late second round or that late first round, you know.
For sure.
I
And I think
he's a draftable guy just because of the ball talent, the on-ball talent, though.
For sure. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't begrudge anyone who has him there, for sure. Because yeah, you're right. I remember that he started super slow from 3 last season. Like I'm gonna pull this up. Prior to the start of January, he was 17.9% from 3 last year on 2 per game. So the volume and like the efficiency went way up down the stretch last season. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that could happen again. So let's move on to our next guy. This is we're really kind of going on a lot of confusing prospects today, which I like a lot. It's kind of a fun little theme for this episode. David Jones from Memphis. So this is a guy that like I feel tormented by this evaluation. So I actually wrote about this on No Ceilings Plus recently. I did a piece called Spreadsheet Sleepers, where I wrote about guys that really pop analytically in different archetypes. And he was a guy that came up for 3-and-D. And I wrote in that article about how 2 years ago, like the first time I did No Stone Unturned, David Jones was one of the wings that I covered. And I wrote at the time, I was like, David Jones, like the shot selection is really bad. And if he just kind of reels in the shot selection and gets the 3-point percentage up, like I could see him being a first round pick. And he had a rough year. He was not good at St. John's last year. I shouldn't say he was not good, but he had a down year. It was under 40% from the field, under 30% from 3. Still had his turnover issues, like whatever. And then this offseason, I was talking to another evaluator, and they were like, who's like the no sun turn guy you got the most wrong? And I was like, David Jones. And like, I was like, but now I've learned like a guy that, you know, shoots that poorly and isn't a great free throw shooter and is like bad in mid-range pull-ups. Like that's not usually a guy that you project to like suddenly make a big shooting leap. And now this year, it looks like he's made a big shooting leap. Yeah. And boy, am I confused. So David Jones has this monster game this week against Virginia. 26 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and a block. On the year, he is averaging 20.8 points per game, a little over 6 rebounds, 2.2 steals, 0.6 blocks. And he is taking over 6 threes a game and making 39.7% of them. And he's 82.2% at the free throw line, while also taking career high 6.6 free throws per game. He's still a little erratic. He's still a little wild. There are still games where David Jones is chucking shots that I would really prefer he not take. He gets a little bit out of control and like dribbles into trouble a lot when he gets sped up a lot. He just plays too fast and it leads to turnovers. But man, when he is hot, like he gets
Yeah,
microwave hot. Like this dude
it's electric.
is on fire when the shot is falling in. And he's a guy who makes a ton of plays on the defensive end too. And like he's got good speed. He uses that to get into passing lanes. He can meet people at the rim. He can finish above the rim on offense. Like he is a very physical player, like not super strong, not like unbelievably athletic, like definitely a good athlete. But yeah, like it's just one of these things where like I feel like maybe I'm anchoring myself a little too much and I need to reassess and just say he's been really good this year. But what have been your impressions of David Jones at Memphis this season?
I feel like so there's a lot of good role players in the NBA, especially at the wing
Mm-hmm.
position.
Yep.
A lot of them did play that kind of David Jones role in college where they were taking a lot of shots that you will never see them take again in their career in any other setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they made them and they looked good doing it, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he has that weird little sporadic pull-up game that from the mid-range where he'll size up Ryan Dunn and take a dribble and hang in the air while he flies past, and it'll just be nothing but net.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, I think I trust the shot from the outside.
Okay.
I think the release looks good. I'm a big like when I'm not a shot doctor or anything like
No.
that, but
Yeah.
when I look
Mm-hmm.
at shots, I like to see the transfer of energy. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care
Yep.
what it looks like coming up, or I mean, that's a bad way of putting it, but I don't care what it looks like in the upper body. Just like if it looks like it's a clean from feet to shoulders to your release point, if it looks clean coming off the wrist, that's all I care about. And it looks clean coming off the wrist with David Jones, and he's got a little hang in the air when he shoots.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be a shot that translates to the next level, and it's a shot that he's shown has a little more versatility than maybe we thought before. You know?
Yeah. That's the thing too, is like the confidence has always been there, which like I'm a big proponent of like I'd rather take the guy who does too much than I need to be like, hey, reel it in, than the guy where I'm like, I don't
Mhm.
know if he can do that stuff. And like I know David Jones can do stuff, which like to me, I would so much rather have that. Um, I think the other thing I like about David Jones too is that he like I think, and I know like I just like complained about the turnover problem. He's averaging 1.4 assists to 2.5 turnovers.
Yeah.
But I thought in the Virginia game, like he showed that like when he plays within the speed of a game, he can see the floor. Like it wasn't
Mhm.
like a big assist game for him, but some of the passes he made, it's like, all right, like nice read. That was pretty polished of you. Like, and he had those flashes back when he was at DePaul too, that like I don't normally I look at a guy with like those kind of like assist to turnover numbers and I'm like, this guy just doesn't know what he's doing. And I don't think that's the case with David Jones. I think David Jones speeds himself up too much and makes mistakes sometimes. But I think when he is like within himself and being a little bit more cautious, I actually think he can be a pretty good decision maker on the right days.
I agree with that. I think like sporadic is the word I've used. I think 2 or 3 times at this point, but
That's it. That's like
uh,
the word though. Like it is
yeah,
like I'm
I mean, I
completely with
think
you.
Memphis also really likes to play fast. They've got a point guard, Devon
Yes.
Finnerly, who like is very flashy, loves to throw the behind the backs and the step back threes and all that kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
it's a play style that I think he's having fun playing in. But like you
Yeah.
said, the assist to turnover ratio has been uh, not the greatest. But
Mhm.
he really can, I think, do a little bit of everything when the offense is slowing down and playing a little more to his pace.
Yeah. So I think where I get a little hung up with him ultimately is like, and let's touch on the defense real quick. Like the
Mm,
defense is interesting. I think like any kind of high playmaking defensive wing in college, like there are plays where he plays himself out of position, like both on and
yeah.
off the ball, where like he'll try to go like at a player's handle too far to one side and then give up the other side. It's like an easy driving lane. There'll be moments where he's like too eager to meet somebody at the rim, so he's like way over helping from the weak side, and then like his shooter is too open. He can gamble, and then the offense gets an advantage because he tried to dart a passing lane and didn't get a steal. Those kind of things happen. I do think
Mm,
that sort of comes with the territory. Like again, it's just my personal philosophy. I'd rather have the guy that like knows he can do that stuff, that can do that stuff on occasion, than a guy who I don't think can at all. Um, on the ball, it is best. I think he's quite good because he is willing to be so physical, and he looks pretty long. I I worry about if he's actually 6'6". Like when
Yeah,
I
he
thought he was
looks.
standing next to Ryan Dunn, I think he's like 6'4".
I think it's like a 6'5", 6'4.5" type thing, maybe like
Yeah.
6'4" without shoes. Uh, it's not. He's not a big forward. He's not a
Mhm.
huge 6'8", 6'9" wing that's going to be able to get those. Uh, that's going to be able to guard post ups too consistently. He's not going to switch out onto LeBron James and have
Mhm.
too much fun, you know. But
Yeah.
and then offensively, I think the frame kind of at the college level, he's long, he's strong, he's about 200, probably 20 pounds, I think.
Mhm.
Um, he likes that little face-up game where he can get into like jab step, power dribble into a guy, get into those weird little faders or a up and under. But
Mhm.
um, I think it's going to be scaled down at the next level, and I don't think you're going to be seeing as much of those gamble type plays on either
Yeah.
end because of just his size and his kind of just sporadicness. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Going
If
back to that
he
word.
For sure, if he shoots like this, everything is so much more
Mhm.
simple because then
Right?
it's like you can guard the other team's shooting guard, you can catch and shoot, you can attack a closeout, you can drive in a straight line, you can cut, you can finish above the rim. Like it suddenly just
Exactly,
becomes
yeah.
a lot more like easy to compartmentalize. I think without the shot, because you said like because he's not that like big wing, it kind of gets a little scary.
Mhm.
So I like what makes me nervous is at that height. Like I think the role, if he is firing on all cylinders, is sort of similar-ish to the role that Keon Ellis is playing in
I like that.
Sacramento,
I
where
like
it's
that.
like he's this athlete, he's a second side guy, like we want him cutting. He's gonna play off the ball, he can take a lot of threes, and like that's primarily just how he's gonna be used, and then he's like energy and defense.
Mhm.
I think Keon's like a better athlete. Obviously, Keon's like a wild, wild athlete, but Jones like
Keon's awesome,
does
man.
have significant strength on him. I I think like that's kind of the hope. My fear is that he's more like Javante Smart, where it's just like the shot isn't there all the time. It doesn't quite click. And then like the decision making isn't great. So the bad decisions are just like a killer when you're not that level of shooter that like Keon is.
Yeah.
Um,
But I keep going back to, like, the words that, describe, like, inconsistency or anything like that, but
yeah, yeah.
this is a guy who has 6 straight 20-point games, a lot of
Mhm.
them against great competition on one of the best teams in the country.
Yes.
He can produce, and he has been
Mhm.
producing, and he's shown that he can be one of the best players on one of the best teams in the country, and it's just not a hard it's just, like, not a hard thing to, like, not doubt, you know, when you see
For
that.
sure. And like one of the things too is like I've talked a lot about how I've been watching commentary with or games with commentary off this year. In this game, my wife was in the room, so I was just like, all right, I'm gonna leave on commentary because she doesn't want to like be a weird freak who watches a game with no commentary on. Like she wants to know who these guys are and what's happening. Um, they mentioned during the Virginia game that Penny Hardaway like said he's like one of his favorite guys to coach. And I think like that stuff matters a lot
It does.
on the margins. Like, but like not even on the margins. Like that's the difference between do you go mid second and like late first. Like that could be a big differentiator. But yeah, to your point, like the level of competition is good. Like 22 against Mississippi, who's undefeated. 23 against VCU, who like VCU is not the best team in the world, but they've got some like big, nasty defensive
They
wings
do, they've
between
always
Tebow
had that, like,
Lawal and
Vince
like Michael
Williams wing.
Bell. Yeah, like they've always got those guys. 29 against Texas A&M, who's always good defensively. 26 against Virginia, who's always good defensively. 22 against Clemson, which like matchup wise, like I mean that Godfrey guy's like a tough matchup for him, but other than that, like that one's a little bit easier. But still, like four teams, like three of whom are regarded as like really good defensive teams that have the
Yeah,
type of personnel that theoretically should be able to stop him. Like I think
and
I
they
got
just
to get yeah, I think I got to get over it, right? Like I just kind of got to get over it with David Jones and be like, yeah, you were disappointed in him a year ago, move on. Like I don't know if he keeps like I feel like in this draft I can't really like keep him out of the second round at this
yeah,
stage,
no.
even with like so just like a quick like who would you rather? Would you rather have David Jones or Wooga Poplar? Because they're kind of in that same
Mm,
vein where it's like physical wing, probably close to 6'4".
yeah. I think I like Wooga ever so slightly more. I think he
Okay,
can burn people off the catch a little bit more. Like, I think he's a little more dangerous just in
he's
a more
thicker.
confined spot up situation
Hmm.
where David might take his time a little bit more and get you a shot that you might not like as much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I lean Wooga Poplar, but I mean
Wooga's
it's
shooting track record is better too. Like Wooga's always been consistent from 3, like
yeah.
if nothing else, and like that was his rep coming out in high school too. So
Mm.
yeah, just wanted to bounce that one off you because that's like a guy that I'll probably have in a similar tier. Let's go to another just like surprise shooting breakout, Devin Carter.
Can't say enough good
Wow,
things. Wow.
this
I think
is
as far
crazy.
yeah, as far as the shooting goes, I think my one issue with him, because like obviously I trust the shot. I think it'll go in at the next level.
Okay.
He'll pull it up from 40 feet if he can on a certain possession. I think that's where my issue lies because I think he does like sacrifice a few possessions offensively when he's just trying to get going from 3, and he can
Yeah.
get it going quick. But early on in that Marquette game where neither team was really getting hot, he was kind of taking early shots from deep that weren't going in yet, and then he ended up with 5 or 6 threes, and he looked like the best defensive player on the floor.
Yeah. So Devin Carter, let's do some table setting real quick because yeah, this is like a wild one.
Yeah, he's out
He
of nowhere.
Yeah, sort of like he was a guy that like I vividly remember writing a quick hit about him and being like, he will be a 4-year college player who will play in the Portsmouth Invitational. And it's like
Mhm.
that might not be the case if this holds. Like,
But
there's
that's like
no
what
way.
he thought.
Yeah, it was. Like, I don't think it was like a bad eval at the time.
Yeah.
So he played a year at South Carolina, a year at Providence. In those 2 seasons, was always a phenomenal defender. Like, was always 6'3", tough, dogged, determined. Like, had some stuff to him as a passer, but like really just a guy who would lock you down. But in that same time frame, 28.8% from 3 on like low-ish volume. This
Mhm.
season, he is taking 6.3 threes per game and making 39.1% of them.
Yeah. I was looking at the numbers earlier. The funny thing is the free throw isn't like I think it's below 70.
No, it's
But
still, yeah, he's still like for his career a 70% free throw shooter.
yeah, but the shot looks so good on film too, and it's like it's a repeatable motion. It's
Yes.
something that he can shoot the same and off the catch, off the dribble from
Mhm.
40 feet or from 20 feet. Like it's
Yeah. So like I'm just like looking through my spreadsheets here real quick. Like guys with like similar numbers to him are like Malcolm Brogdon, Dante DiVincenzo was like in the same category in
one
college,
comp.
like around Devontae Graham. Like this is like in terms of just like volume and percentage. Like this is like
Mhm.
really, really good company that he's found himself in.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And like to your point too, like you mentioned like some of the pull-ups, like yeah, like for sure he does like leave possessions on the table because he is your lead guard. And sometimes the possession is just like I've dribbled up and I've decided I'm shooting it from 33
Yeah,
feet away.
exactly.
Like it definitely goes wrong at times, but like the fact that he is hitting the occasional logo range 3
And
makes
the
me feel
audacity,
like
like
yes. Yeah, and like he was never a bad shot selection guy. Like I have no notes in previous years on Devin Carter where I'm like, why is he taking these shots?
yeah.
Never. Like so he clearly thinks these are shots that he's going to make, and he's not totally wrong.
No,
Um
he's been absolutely right, quarter of the way into the season.
yeah, so if he is like the type of defender that he is, which is like he's got some of the best hands on
One
defense.
compare
Like
one comparison I saw is from Chucking Darts on Twitter.
yeah,
He
love
called him
Chuck.
Devin Caruso. Devin Caruso, I love it because
I
he
so
he doesn't get screened. He just doesn't, and,
no.
like, you can throw the biggest body at him, and he will get skinny, he will throw his body at a ridiculous angle, and he
Mhm.
will stay attached, and Tyler Kolek had so much trouble getting around screens with him,
Yeah,
on Instagram.
he's just always in front. Like he is always in front. Like it does
Oh, like
not matter what you're throwing at him. Like he will be between you and the basket
mhm,
every second of every possession. And like he doesn't have like for a guy with those defensive playmaking numbers, like he doesn't do, and I think it's probably because he's more of like a high block rate guy for a guard than a high steal rate guy. Like he doesn't get too cute. Like he's never like, ooh, I'm gonna try to play him from behind and like poke the ball loose. Like he doesn't do any of the stuff that like most defensively productive guards do in order to attain those numbers. Like it feels like it's within the flow of the game, and like it's a 4.1 block rate, which is obscene for a guard.
Absurd.
And so much of it is the result of him just like, locking a guy down and people having nowhere to go against him. And then he just sort of swallows them up with his chest at the end of a possession. It is of guys who stuck in the NBA at the guard position. The only person I have with a higher block rate is Derek White, and like Craig Porter is probably going to be there.
And that's what I was about to mention, Craig Porter, because obviously I'm a born Ohio, love the Cavs. He's awesome at staying between his guy in the basket, and he averaged a block and a half too at Wichita State last year. Same as Devin. Same as Devin.
So it's been pretty wild. The rest of his game, I think, is more like solid than good. I think that's where I differentiate a little bit between someone like him and Caruso. Is I think Caruso's probably a little bit more vertically athletic. Like Caruso can like really get out and run. Like I think he's probably like end to end faster, a little bit more vertically explosive. And I just don't feel like Carter is like super bursty with the ball. And I also trust a guy like Caruso a little bit more as a decision maker. And I think that's true for a guy like DeAnthony Melton too, where it's like, or even like a Javon Carter, where I think with Carter, Devin Carter, there's times where he just gets a little too, like kind of will just sort of play himself into a bad, like crowded part of the court and like dribble into it and then pick up his dribble. And that's the sort of thing I want to see him avoid, is like, if he is this kind of shooter and he's got a little bit less playmaking responsibility, maybe that comes around. Like they kind of have him as like the off guard now. I just don't know how much I love the handle and the passing. And I feel like that's the sort of stuff that has to come around for me to get him into the first round. Because if I'm just like comparing him to other defensive guards in this class, like somebody like Reed Shepherd doesn't pressure the rim at all, like not nearly as tough as Devin going downhill. Not as built as Devin, not as strong as Devin. But I do think he has a much better read on the floor than Devin Carter does.
Same with somebody like Kylan Boswell, who I'm big. I've gotten higher and higher on as the season goes on. He just bullish defensive guards that are positives on that end. Philosophically, I can go on a spiel about guard defense and how I don't think it matters as much as other defense.
But when you have it, it's pretty valuable.
It's like, pretty valuable. Yeah, point of attack defense can win you playoff series, and it can win you matchups. But with a guy like Kylan, I think he sees the floor better, and I think he probes better than Devin Carter, because Carter's looking for a shot first, and sometimes that'll be the pull-up three, and sometimes that'll be a nice little rim attack, but it's not always going to be a pretty product on the floor. Yeah,
Kylan is like a guy that every coach will trust. Like Kylan Boswell talks about like how people's dads describe a point guard. Like that's like how like, but he has like that new school like polish and flair with like the dramatic step backs and how low he can play with his handle.
Or
like he's got some passes, of that. Yes, like he's a little bit flashy, but he's never biting off more than he can chew. Like there's very, very rarely am I like, oh, Kylan Boswell, like, what were you doing on that play? Like he's very refined. I feel like where Devin Carter doesn't have that.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say.
Yeah, I think that's a really kind of interesting comparison. I'd almost rather have Devin Carter, even with like the flaws, because I think the defense is a little bit more translatable. I do think he's bigger. I worry about how like big Kylan Boswell actually is. I know he's like thick, but at the height, like I didn't think he looked very tall next to Mark Sears the other night.
And Mark Sears is 6'1" on a good day.
Yeah, and like I would just so much rather bet on a guy that's like special in one regard, and I think that's what Devin Carter is on defense. And I think if the shot gets there, like all this other stuff that we're talking about, like he doesn't read the floor that well, he gets a lot of control. Like this stuff that we like routinely kind of see guys improve at the next level. And I actually think he's like just been a little bit worse with that this year than he normally was. Like I thought last year he didn't like pop to me as like a poor decision maker. Like I think even within this season, I think it'll probably come around a little bit from what it's been. So he's probably adjusting to his new game, because like he didn't play like this a year ago. Like the looks and stuff he's setting up now is different than it was.
And I think he will be an off guard at the next level. I think he will play that Derek White role that who are some other examples of that? The quickly possessions when he's in with Brunson, I feel like he's
Yep.
kind of playing that role offensively,
It's
where
like
he
kind of like what
won't have to
DeJounte
handle that
Murray
much.
does in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah. But where he won't handle as much, or he won't be like you pass Devin Carter the ball, you're expecting him to get the shot up quick or wait for a screen and run around it or just pass it off again, you know?
Yep. Yeah. And I think that'll almost buy him some time in a way too. That it's like the game that he plays in a Shannon NBA court will be a little bit more simplified. Like I don't think anyone's going to play him under the pretense of like, all right, run the offense like that. That does help
Yeah.
him in some ways. Let's move on to YVES Missi. I love this dude. I really liked him out of the gate. Like he's one of those guys that you see in the first game and it's like, oh man, this is going to scale up. So he is a 7-footer out of Baylor. Defensive numbers are wild. I believe the steal and block numbers, I don't know if they still are, but at one point they were like superior to what Nick Claxton did as a sophomore. He is really, really good on the defensive end and just had one of his best games of the season against Duke. A lot of it while guarding Kyle Filipowski. Finished with 11 points. 10 rebounds, 8 of which came on the offensive glass, 5 blocks and a steal. Thoughts on that outing in general, first off?
I think, I mean, Kyle Filipowski is a guy who I think is going to be good. Somebody who I had in the late 30s coming into the year, and he's soared into the top 20. YVES Missi had his
Missi.
I think it's Missi had his way with him on the defensive end. It just didn't seem like Kyle could get an inch, whether it was in the face-up game, whether it was in the post-up. Because Kyle likes to, and he's one of the best bigs in the country when it comes to attacking in space. When it's 10 to 12 feet from the basket, he'll attack that like little bit of space you get him, and he will make something happen. He couldn't do that with Missi because Missi is just so long and he's strong and athletic to where you can't get that inch with him. And I don't think Filipowski is a great enough athlete to where he could separate vertically once he got that bump in.
Yeah, and I thought it was really just instructive of the in-season growth that we've seen from Missi when you look at like what happened to him in the Florida game, where Samuels just like pieced him up in the post. Like Samuels was like, I'm a senior, I'm more polished than you, I have post moves, I'm gonna throw them at you, and you're gonna bite on every single fake I throw, and I'm just gonna get easy one after easy one at the rim. And like Filipowski, like hit him with some stuff, and Missi was either athletic enough to recover or savvy enough to kind of stay with it and keep a read on it and still turn him away.
His second jump is fantastic. Like
he gets up so quick.
Jesus Christ.
It's nutty. And like I just feel like any criticism I hear of Missi, and maybe this is me being too high on him and like needing to step back. I feel like all the flaws I hear with him are like normal young big man flaws.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh yeah, sometimes he bites on fakes and like he's struggling at the free throw line a little bit, and like his passing feels pretty poor, and like I get that. But I just think he's really good at a lot of important stuff. Which is like as reductive as it sounds, like that is the easiest way to evaluate and find NBA big men. Is just like, do they stop guys from scoring at the rim? Do they score at the rim? And Missi does that stuff.
I put in a very simple Bartorovic filter like a couple weeks ago. 10 plus offensive rebound and block percentage, and then 10 plus dunks and a box plus minus of greater than 7.
Yeah.
The names that popped up were all first round picks, all guys who have stuck in the league and gotten second or third contracts. Some of them even are superstars or multi-time all-stars. That's just it's a very simple filter, but it's like you get a guy who can get you possessions or stabilize possessions, who can keep shots from going in around the rim, and just impacts winning at the simplest of levels that you look at, you know, and that just works. That works in the NBA.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, for a guy to have just the offensive rebounding rate that he does is pretty rare. Like his offensive rebounding percentage right now is 21.
It's absurd.
Which is like Jared Vanderbilt numbers. Like Jared Vanderbilt is like, when I say Jared Vanderbilt numbers, I mean like only Jared Vanderbilt did that. Like that is exceedingly rare company.
You're getting your hand on every ball that comes down, or I mean, literally a fifth of balls that come down, which is absurd.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, that's so many extra possessions for your team. Numbers in the defensive class are more average, but like I don't think that's like an uncommon thing. Just like for a team that uses sort of like a gang rebounding approach.
Mm,
In the block percentage is really high too. Like 11.5 for a block rate is phenomenal, but he's also a guy that's going to be able to play in multiple ball screen coverages. Like he's a guy that like is
mm.
not going to need to be in drop all the time, and he's going to be able to switch. He's going to be able to come out. He's going to be able to jump passing lanes, which is something that you just don't see very often from big men. And when he switches onto smaller guys, like they freak out, like they panic, they pick up their dribbles, they turn it over. Like guys make so many poor choices when he gets switched on to them that like I understand he has his limitations as a playmaker and that he's going to be a guy that makes mistakes if he's holding onto the ball for too long. He's going to more than make up for that on the other end of the floor. And on the other side of the court, like he doesn't need to touch the ball a lot, and he's willing to screen. He's willing to set off ball screens, which just like a lot of young big guys don't want to do that stuff. It's
He says
boring.
some
You
neat
don't,
exit screen.
yeah, like it's not something that you get something out of all the time, but like he's willing to do it. Ridiculous catch radius between how high he jumps, the length, the power that he finishes with. He's getting to the free throw line a ton. He was, I don't know if he still is, he was like top 20 in the country in dunks as of like a couple weeks ago, and he's playing like 20 minutes a game. Yeah, like he's a big time play finisher. And I think he's got some upside as a playmaker. And I know that like the assist rate's poor, he turns it over a little bit, but I like how he puts it on the court. I think he's a guy that like if you look at the high school tape, and I'm not a big like look at the high school, like I'm not a huge high school film guy, but I think it shows that he is comfortable like putting it on the deck or like turning the corner on another big man if it's like a zoom action or a handoff setting. Like I do think that stuff is in there. And I just see like a starting caliber center in YVES and like a guy that you're going to be able to do a lot of stuff with. Is he someone that you can run a bunch of offense through? Probably not. Is he probably going to be lower on the usage side of the spectrum? Yeah. But he has a lot of like rare tools the teams kind of go out of their way to find in a big man.
And I think playmaking wise, I think it's a smaller part of it, but I think screening does equate to playmaking to some degree. I mean, Rudy Gobert, Jared Allen, those are guys who exemplify that in the best of ways because they will get guys open with screen. I mean, Jacoby Walter has probably scored a dozen or more points just off of Missi screening him from one corner to the other, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I really like what I've seen from him. He's like an easy top 20 for me right now. Like I think I've got him around 15 or so, and that feels kind of low, honestly. Like if he is going to be a starting center in a class with a lot of guys that might not be starters, where do you kind of have him currently? If you even have a board at this point, because a lot of people don't. But
I have I think 150 guys on my board at this point in time, which I think I might even expand that because this class is so wide open.
I know, yeah.
But he's pushing top 20. I want to throw kind of a would you rather at you this time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because this is a guy who had big preseason expectations versus somebody who had close to none. Adembona or YVES Missi?
YVES by like a mile.
Yeah.
I'm pretty low on Adembona right now. He measured really poorly at the combine last year, and I just don't think he got any better. Like that sounds really harsh, but I just look at the player he was last year versus this year, and I'm not sure that he's much further along.
That big, and we'll talk about Felix Okpara, but Felix Okpara did a lot of great stuff against Adembona in that Ohio State matchup.
Yeah. So like I just think with the trajectory that he's on, I feel much better betting on YVES at this point than Adembona. We are going to take a quick break. We'll be back on the other side doing some feature focus, talking about Zach Edey and Ajay Mitchell. We will be right back. All right. So I'm going to kind of take the lead here and talk about Zach Edey. So I've got a big Zach Edey piece coming out this week, and he's contentious. Like he's one of these guys and contentious in a weird way. Like there are definitely prospects. Like I think Kylan Boswell and Judah Mintz are good examples where depending on who you talk to, there are going to be people that are like, he's a top 20 prospect. And there are going to be people that will be like back end top 100. Zach Edey is a guy that I think most people that you talk to will be like, oh yeah, he can like play in the NBA and like he'll like be around.
Yeah.
I think because of that, I think that perception, people might have him much higher or much lower. Because the idea is like, oh yeah, like he's an NBA player. So some people that might like generally be more risk averse might put him a little bit higher.
Mm.
I think a lot of people like, why am I going to take like both and 2 points if you want to be just like real regressive about it and be like, I don't see any real upside in him. That's probably what you're thinking. I think Zach Edey is very good. And I think Zach Edey has a chance to be a lot better than people think. I think there are starting center avenues for Zach Edey with the NBA. So just to kind of run through some of the big points with Edey, he is scoring 45.1 points per 100 possessions, which tops like what Trey and Zion did in college as like the most prolific scorers they've seen in a long time. He kills mismatches, but even like against Umar Ballo, like he still kind of got to his spots and like has a touch to finish. His offensive rebound rate, we just talked about like a phenomenal offensive rebounder. It's like this might not sound as impactful, but his offensive rebound rate of 17 is like a career low, and it's still a ridiculous number. Like he would still be the next best guy behind Jared Vanderbilt. He's like 78% of the rim in the half court. So because of this, like if you throw the ball into Zach Edey in the post, you have to double. Like you can't just let him drop the ball in the basket. And because he's strong, unlike a lot of these other like tall, skinny guys, like a Taco Fall.
Or Connor Vanover or somebody like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Vanover is like a stick. And like Vanover, like there's a reason he was much better at Oral Roberts than he has been at Mizzou. And it's physicality. He's going to be able to get position. And you have to double him. And when you double him, he's a good passer. The 11 assist rate is really good for a big man. But I also think he's reading the floor better and better understanding like where help is coming from and how defensive rotations work and how to better punish and leverage that. It's not always the like into me, back out to the guy that passed it to me and where the help is coming from. He's getting a little bit more sophisticated as far as how he passes the ball out of the post. And because he's got multiple bodies hanging off of him, he gets fouled a ton. He's taking 11 free throws a game. He's making about 77% of them. So he's a really good free throw shooter. We talk in the draft space a lot about like advantage creators. You throw the ball to Zach Edey in the post and you have created an advantage.
Yeah.
Like I understand that like, yes, the NBA game is faster and that is going to be a problem. Like it is going to be an issue. He doesn't score in transition at all in college. And then we'll talk about the defense too. What I will say for the defense is that Purdue is one of the best teams in the country at preventing teams from shooting around the basket because people don't want to come around the basket near him. Best shot blocking rate of his career this season at 8.8, which is also just like a solid number for a big. Teams shoot really poorly with him around the rim. This is where the questions kind of start is like, okay, he has to play in a deep drop or in zone. Zone, like the Heat are like the big zone defense team in the league, and they play zone on like less than 10% of their possessions this year.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to have to be deep drop. Yeah. So it's probably going to have to be deep drop. The teams that have done well against Purdue are teams that have like pick and popped him to death. He's going to have to be like sort of insulated by his teammates defensively because like if a guy, I don't worry so much about like the pick and pop thing because like a guy like Zubac plays on like a deep drop.
That's exactly the name that comes to mind when I see Zach Edey is
Ivica
Zubac.
The question I've asked like a lot of friends in the draft space over the last week is like, can Zach Edey develop Ivica Zubac's balance? Because Zubac, like if you watch like how he stands and how he moves his feet when he has to respond to a pop, like he doesn't like fly by, but he does like enough to just like kind of get a hand in the way, but still have himself on guard if a guy tries to like attack him and blow by him. And I think the hope is that because Zach Edey is a multi-sport athlete who didn't start playing basketball until he's 15, and he's put in all this work on his body, like, can he get to a point where he's like 80% of that? Because that's probably all he needs to be given the extra size and length. And if he is, then you are okay playing him in drop coverage. The issue is still like how many minutes a game can he play? Because like he's playing 30 a game in college, which is great. There's only 10 starting centers in the NBA right now playing more than I think it was like 28 a game I believe was the number that I went with. So it's not like uncommon for a starter to play that much, but there are like for sure going to be matchups used like just stylistically from time to time. And then I'll kind of just wrap it up with the conclusion from the article and then throw it back to you. But uh, over the last decade, nobody has come close to matching the combination of his effective field goal percentage, offensive rebounding rate, defensive rebounding rate, block rate, and assist percentage, which I think shows that he is just like dominant, but also like knows what's happening on the court. Um, the only other guys to have an offensive BPM over 12 are Keegan Murray and Zion. He's only a high major player to have a true shooting percentage over 65 and a usage rate over 30. I look at guys like Brandon Pajemski and Trace Davis, where it looked a little funky. Like Pods, it was like, well, he's small, he's slight. With TJD, it's like, well, he's not a center size guy, but he is a center because he doesn't shoot. And like people are like, oh, you know, is this going to work or whatever? And ultimately, like, they were just really productive guys with feel that panned out. And while Edey might not have the feel of those two guys, he's probably more dominant than either of them were at the college level. I think there's a chance that he is more than like a novelty. And I think the fact that he's beating us over the head with his production should maybe tell us that. And I have Zach Edey 20th on my board right now, which is like way better than most people. But I think with the feel and the size, I think there's a possibility that he's just like really good. Where are you at with Zach Edey? And how concerned are you about like pace of play up and down, the shorter shot clock, like the number of minutes he plays? Like, where are you at with all that sort of stuff?
So I think the tier that Edey is in on my big board currently is like 35 or 40 players. So it's very like fluid. Currently, I think if I was looking at the number I have assigned next to his name, it's like fringe first or second round.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of people that I've spoken to have him.
But I do think that there is a path to starterdom with him, and I think it's going to be a not too like alien path that a lot of big men have taken. And I think people will see the 7-4 and they'll see the college production and they'll look at some of the highlights and it's a lot of post ups and it's not the quickest looking thing in the world. And they'll kind of just assign that, oh yeah, this is a guy who's not going to work in the NBA pace. I don't think that's necessarily true, and I don't think it's nothing we haven't seen before, especially in the last 10 years, you know? He does get to a lot of his points through post-ups and just being big and sealing off early and getting a good look at the rim through that avenue. But he does have a couple of possessions in the pick and roll where he's screening really well, and then he'll come flying in behind the ball handler, catch it like super high, and then he's just 2 feet from the rim when he's standing 10 feet away, you know?
Yeah.
He's a guy that you just don't stop when he's coming at you at the rim. And then, like you said, he's a good enough passer where, like, you can bring two to the wall, but you're not getting hands high enough to keep him from seeing the floor or getting a pass over you. And I think just with the reps that he's gotten in the role that he has at Purdue, he was all Big Ten second team his sophomore year. They've just run him through this kind of high usage role so often that he's adjusted to it so well over the time that he's had, and I think he'll continue to adjust the more as you scale him down, you know?
Yeah, I think that's where I'm ultimately just optimistic. Is I think that even if the role is like smaller than like what I'm presenting as like the absolute best case scenario, right? Where it's like he can like play like Ivica Zubac minutes and like be a quality starter on a playoff team. Like even if he's not that, I think he could bring like obviously a completely different player than Naz Reid, but that sort of thing where it's just like, hey, this is our backup big man, but he's going to kick our offense into overdrive. Like it's going to be just a different look that is tough for opposing teams to deal with.
And your ball handlers off your bench might have trouble getting around him at the rim, you know? And it's like, and I don't think he's like you said, I mean, he's going to be a deep drop big. And I think the roster around him will have to be designed and
tailored.
distributed like that in
Yeah.
Mintz, which is a little hard of a sell for a backup big, and I think that's why I have him that much
Yes.
lower than you.
Yeah.
But like going back to Zubox, I tweeted about Zubox because I was watching the Clippers Pacers game a little while ago. That roster has so many great perimeter defenders that they can make drives difficult. And if you are able to get low, you just have to get over Zubats, and you can't get over Zubats that easily. And Zach Edey is even harder to get over because he's 7'4" with I don't know what the wingspan number is.
It was like 7'10" and a half, I
Yeah.
believe, was what it was at the combine, which I guess is like a 9. I think it's like a 9'7" standing reach
Yeah,
too.
so you're getting challenged on the side, and this massive Canadian monster is like arms up in front of you. You're not going to have fun trying to get that ball into the rim or even passed out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm optimistic about him. So that's my hard sell for Zach Edey. Go read the whole article when it comes out. Really proud of the work I put into it. The guy you wanted to talk about this week was Ajay Mitchell at UC Santa Barbara. Give us a little rundown of his game for people that might not be familiar, because he is like one of these guys that's playing at a smaller school. But like if you're in like the draft space, I think he's starting to become a much hotter name. Like I know a lot of people in our crew see him as like a first round talent. I've been a little bit lower, so I just want to hear like your overall, tell people who he is, and then kind of give me the sales pitch on him.
So big lead guards are kind of the hot new thing in the NBA. Not super new, but Ajay Mitchell is a guy, or Ajay.
I think
I'm
it's
not sure.
Ajay, I think is how
Ajay.
I've heard it. Yeah, I'll pull up the synergy clip to get confirmation. But
Gotcha. I've also been watching a lot of games on mute, so
yep,
pronunciations evade me
that's my
occasionally.
lifestyle. Yeah.
But he's a 6'5", 6'6" lead ball handler that handles it really well, sees the floor well enough, and gets to the rim better than I think any other lead guard in this class. And it's not going to be Isaiah Collier where he's getting downhill at 37 miles an hour and he's doing some like crazy sidestep around the rim protector. It's going to be just more methodical. He's going to change his height and his direction a little bit, and he's going to ultimately maintain the angle that he was trying to create in the first place and get to the rim, And that's just a really valuable skill set. And I think you see the maximized aspect of the maximization around that ability in somebody like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who isn't the most explosive athlete. Shai is fast, but he maintains angles. And when they're stops, he can really just like throw a crossover or change his feet up or his height and keep going to where he wanted to go initially. And I think that's something that Ajay does really, really well. And then on top of that, you have some shooting upside there. He doesn't take a lot of threes. I think it's like 4.8 per 100 possessions
Really
from
low
three.
for a guard.
Really, really low. But the mid-range game pops on occasion. Like he'll have great games from mid-range where he's not getting downhill, but he is countering and he's making something happen 10 to 15 feet from the basket. Or he's just flat out getting to the line and scoring, like in the New Mexico State game. Didn't shoot it well particularly, got to the line 14 times.
Yep.
I think he's just like a guy who doesn't have too many answers offensively, and even though it's not flashy and on first glance you might say he might be not an NBA lead guard athlete, I think it just works. I think it works, and there are a lot of examples of it working.
Yeah, the comp that I've had thrown at me a lot is Andrew Nembhard.
Okay, I like that.
And yeah, he's like a guy that I had a really hard time with, like coming into the year. Like I liked him, but then I saw him popping up on mock drafts, and I was like, I don't know, like 6'4" guard. Like I get the height, I get the feel, but like just hasn't proven enough as a jump shooter. But like granted, was always like last year he was like a phenomenal mid range scorer. This year the mid range hasn't fully been there for him. But like good free throw shooter on like a good number of attempts. Like I get the idea of it, but just not a guy who's a great athlete. And in this era, like a guard who isn't that athletic and like can't shoot threes is just like no thanks. Every time I watch him, I'm like, do I have him too low? Because to your point, like just some of the directional stuff that he does with the ball, like there'll be times where he gets to a spot on the court.
His hips are really jittery is one thing that I notice, and,
Yeah.
like, he's not explosive, but he changes his heights, and, like, he has this, like, almost, like, crouching leopard kinda stance when he's sizing you up where he
Mhm.
can just, like, go anywhere out of it, and it works. It's not explosive, and it's not fast, but it's, like, it's twitchy, and it's strong, and it ultimately leads to him getting to his spots.
Yeah, and like he'll attack at just like unconventional angles. Like there was a play in the Howard game the other day that where like
Mhm,
he set up an assist where he caught the ball and like the defender was like almost forcing him baseline and like starting to react as if he was going to go baseline, and then like he just immediately took off toward the middle instead, and like he got there and was able to spray it out for a three from there. But just the like immediate like, oh, I know where you want me to go and I'm not going there
yeah,
was like a great way to just like set that up. Or there have been plays too where like I've seen him, it almost seems like he's picking up his dribble in a spot where he shouldn't, but then he'll throw like a weird like pivot body fake in, and the defender will still be like, oh, it's time to swarm, and then get off balance from that, and then he'll create a mid-range shot for himself off of that. Like the
mhm.
gears are always turning. The gears are always turning with
And
Mitchell. And like there's just constant misdirection and wiggle and creativity and counters that like he's not as easy to contain as like a guy who with his athletic profile should be.
And it's I think it's more than just like, "This is where you're leading me, and I'm gonna go somewhere else."
Mm-hmm.
It's more like, "This is where you want me to go, but I know how to get where I want to go despite that," you know? And I know all these little tricks that I can throw at you and all these little fakes that you're gonna bite on, whether I'm dribbling or I'm shot faking, and it's just gonna work, you know? And you
Mm-hmm.
can't do too much.
Yeah, I
I
think
think that's where I'm at with AJ, is that he just gets where he wants to go and he knows how to do it.
so. Are you like he's like knocking on the first round kind of guy? Are you like him in the first round kind of guy? Or are you like I like him in the second at this stage?
I'm a him in the first round,
Okay.
maybe top 25 type guy.
Okay. Yeah, my concern and like why I liked somebody like Andrew Nemhard better was I was a little bit more sold on the shot making difficulty from the outside.
Okay.
So Nemhard was like another guy who was like lower volume from three, but in that season, like he was taking some really deep ones. He was taking some tough ones off the dribble. Or like with Mitchell, I just haven't seen a ton of like long range shot making that has me like, all right, here we go.
Mhm.
He is 47% on the
Yeah.
year. He's taken like 17 threes through 8 games, which is not great. And again, it's like, I guess we'll just call it like the Judah Mintz question of like, well, are you not shooting threes because you don't think you can shoot threes, or are you just not shooting threes because like you know that you can get more efficient looks given the level that you're playing at? Um, a point that Nathaniel Miller brought up on Twitter that I thought was good was that like we're not really going to see him play a lot of great teams. Like
Yeah.
their schedule this year just kind of stinks, to be frank.
It
He's going
peaked
to
at that
play.
Mexico State game, that New Mexico State game,
Yeah,
and
New
he
Mexico is good, and like
didn't have the greatest from the field night there.
no, yeah, struggled from the field and like kind of had to resort to like foul merchant behavior to
Mhm.
end up with an efficient stat line. But like the field was still really good. Like he's not a guy who is going to like crap his pants when he plays good competition. Like the feel is still there. Um, Gonna play good point guard on UC Davis next week, so that actually won my mid-major game of the week poll. So that'll be sort of like a decent test for him, I guess. The shot mechanics are a little wonky, sort of like arcs it up
Agree.
his body a little bit, shoots it sort of like not like across his body to the degree that like Josh Christopher did, but like
Oh, yeah.
it
Oh, wow.
definitely like comes up at a bit of a curve. I don't know if I was sold on this shot, I'd be much more in. I do think he's actually taken a little bit of a step forward defensively this year.
I agree. Yeah, his synergy numbers look great.
Mhm.
I don't think it's like he doesn't generate a ton of steals or deflections or anything along those
No.
lines. Um, Positionally, I think he's pretty sound. I don't think he's elite or
Yes.
anything like that. He's not Devin Carter.
No,
But
yeah. But he's fine. Like he sticks with guys. Like he knows to throw his body on people because like that is an advantage he has a lot. I think he does well with ball screens on defense, which is going to be the thing he's probably defending the most at the next level.
yeah, and if you're not sold on guard defense as a philosophical like need, I think he does enough offensively. And going back to the jump shot, I think there will be more threes going down the line just because, like I said with Judah, I like from a draft philosophy standpoint, I like the guys who can create their shot in the mid range because I think that in the modern era, that will eventually spread out to 2-3. And I mean, he does a lot of stuff that I think looks like it will translate out to 3 one day from the mid range.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's not unreasonable. There have been a lot worse guys that I've seen people be like, I think he's going to shoot it. Like Ajay, I do think has like a real shot to be a guy that knocks down threes.
Yeah, I think he's making like 85% of his free throws too, and
yep.
That's something you look at, especially at his volume.
Yes, yeah, because he's getting to the free throw line quite a bit. So we are going to head into our final break, and we'll be back with our Sickos session, talking about some guys that are projected outside of the first round that we've had our eyes on recently. Stick with us. All right, here we go. So I'm going to let you lead this one off. You had a couple guys that you brought to the table. Which guy do you want to talk about first?
One of the guys prior to starting the stream that you seem really excited to talk about was Jackson Robinson.
Yeah, let's do it.
Super. Just, I mean, man, can that kid shoot it? He's got kind of like a weird kind of sideways release. I mean, it comes across like
yes,
other side of his head a little bit, but it's smooth. It gets up quick and it goes in at 45% this season.
Yeah.
It's just hard to like look at the volume. Like he's taken a ridiculous amount of threes per 100 possession. I don't want to put a number on it because I feel like I might understate it. I want to say like 16, but it might be 21 at like.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is. Yeah, it's 19.1
Yeah,
threes per 100 possessions, and he's making 43.4% of them. So the volume is, you can't really quibble with the volume.
No, and I mean I think prior to this season at BYU, he was like a 34% guy, obviously on great volume, but didn't really knock it down at the rate he is. But I think with guys who do like there have been examples of guys in college who take good volumes of threes, but didn't necessarily have the opportunities to get going to the extent that Jackson is right now. I think he finally has that opportunity on this BYU team that likes to go fast and likes to shoot a crap ton of threes, where he can just get hot and get going. And I think it's continued throughout this season.
Yeah. So Jackson Robinson, 6'7", I believe is listed height.
He's a big wing.
Yeah, he's a senior at BYU. Averaging 16.5 points per game, 49% from the field. Yeah, just under 44 from three on that absurd volume, and 92.3% from the free throw line. So obviously the selling here is 3-point shooting and 3-point volume, and like he is getting them up. And like I think what I like about him is that it seems like there's more to his game. Like the guy that he reminded me of is a guy I spent a lot of time on last year, and before that was Ben Shepherd. Is it like he also has that, like, he's not cooked if you chase him off the line kind of thing that Ben had, where like Ben like was able to see the floor. He was able to spray it out if he got to the rim. Like he had a little bit more burst than you might think. He wasn't the most like visibly athletic guy. Like Ben, especially in college, was very upright, which he fixed during the pre-draft process. Jackson Robinson is a bit better of a first step. I think he gets up really well around the basket.
Oh, yeah.
Like I really like how he gets up at the basket. So if you chase him off the line, like he can make solid decisions. He can see the floor. Got that first step, got that rim finishing to him. Like I don't think he's a guy that like, oh, if the shot isn't falling, like he's bringing no value. Like he's still, because he shoots so much, he's still going to command that respect from the 3-point line. And if you chase him off the line, like he is going to be fine. I really like the defense too. I thought he used his length really well on that side of the ball. Love what he can bring as a shot blocker. I wonder if there's like some weak side, like rim help upside to him too, because of how well he jumps. Really long. I do worry about how skinny he is. Like he's a guy who like wears a t-shirt, and like that's like Corey and Albert were talking about this the other day. Like usually like there's some sort of like body thing that's a little like off one way or the other if a guy's wearing a t-shirt. I do think Jackson Robinson looks a little bit thin.
Yeah, I
So
don't
I
think he
do
has the broadest
worry.
shoulders.
No. So I don't know how big he's going to be. So even with his length, he's probably mostly a 2. Like I don't know how many like NBA threes. I'm like, oh yeah, like I can throw him on him, unless it's like a team like the Bulls where like they run just like a little bit smaller in general.
Yeah.
Or even like I don't know, like even like Brooklyn on certain nights, because like they tend to play some really small lineups. Like that's where I worry about him a little bit, is that if he's going to be like slightly position locked. And then I'm also just kind of scared about the shot, because and I know that it sounds nuts that like we're talking about a guy who's shooting and making this many threes. My one reservation is just like he was never this level of shooter before. Like the volume was always really high, but like he was never close to this. And if he's like, if the volume stays this high, but he's like 36%, I don't know what to do with that guy. Because it's like, then you're just like solid at a lot of stuff. And like 36% on like high volume is like good, but I don't know that I'm like sprinting to the podium to draft you if that's the case. But like right now, I think he's a pretty clear, like upper half of the second round kind of guy. If like this is the percentage he's going to shoot. And I think he would do on a combine setting, because he is, if this is like the shooter he is, and he has the feel that he has and the length that he has, I trust him as a decision maker. And like, like you mentioned the shot, like it does look a little funky. Like he does kind of shoot it across. I don't know how that's going to speed up at the NBA level.
It's a fast shot though. Like I wouldn't be surprised if it was under half a second, like, or not under half a second, but like in that 0.55 range, which is like elite. It's not Steph Curry, but it's elite, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I worry about, the shot. And then I'm also like a little iffy, because like what made a player like Ben Shepherd pop was that like he was a really good pick and roll 3-point shooter, really good in handoffs, really good off screens, really good in transition. And most of his shots are spot ups. Like they are mostly still like him catching and shooting. The transition numbers haven't been great. He's been good off screens, but he hasn't been running a lot of those. Like if he doesn't have like dynamism as a shooter, I don't know how valuable that is. Would be my other like super like nitpicky critique of like, is he a guy that's like late first, or is he a guy that, is like more of an undrafted type? Like and like, is he a specialist that is almost easy to scheme for, because he's not going to like run around. He's not going to make life more difficult for the defense. Like they don't really have to pay that much attention to him, because it's only from a standstill, would be sort of my other concern with him, I guess. But all in all, I think he's like a real prospect. Like I think he's a guy that if the draft was tomorrow, I'd probably take him in the second round. Do you sort of have him in that sort of second round range, or do you think he's more like pushing first?
I think so. I think he's a draftable prospect at this point in time. I want to see it maintain, because that's like my biggest thing. I think he went like, hold on, let me pull up the numbers. He went 83 of 249 from 33% for the rest of his career, or for the 3 years prior to this, 45%. He's already made 43 threes this year. I want to see it sustain. That's my biggest thing. I think the volume will stay up, but if he can even stay around that 38 or 39% range and flash a little more versatility on his shots, I think that's what's going to sell it for me. I think a high-end outcome for him would be somebody like Trey Murphy, who I brought up prior to the pod starting. I think Trey's got star upside, but on a lower end spectrum, I think just a guy who can knock down that shot, a guy who can run off the screen and relocate. Because he does have a couple possessions where he'll attack a closeout, nothing really materializes, so he'll pass it off, and then he'll run to the other side of the baseline, or he will come off of an exit screen or a flare screen, and he will catch and fire, and it wasn't the first look, but it was the look that got up and went in, and it looked good.
I think where I would like almost like push back on like the Trey Murphy thing is just like Trey was longer. Like Trey's like 6'9".
No, absolutely.
He was coming in stronger and more athletic.
He's stronger than he looks. He's a little skinny, but I mean, he's got bounce, and Trey will soar above the rim if he can get a
Mhm.
good runway too. And I don't think Jackson's the same. Like you get him a launch pad to get off 2 feet, and he's going to go and finish above the rim.
Mhm.
Um, I think he does have some upside when it comes to finishing, and I do like the
I do
way that
too.
he gets off the floor.
Yep.
But I think it is a little. I think it is a little limited in the ways that he can get that kind of running start,
Mhm.
because I don't think the handle is as great, and I think the turnover
It's
numbers
fine.
are. Yeah, I think the turnover numbers are a little higher than you'd want for kind of an off-ball wing.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's kind of a limited handle, not super creative, can't really change direction on the move with it as well as
Mhm.
you might want, even to a kind of more basic degree. But I mean, what you're really selling is the shot, and if the shot maintains, stays in that absurd volume, and even if it trails off a little bit, I think it can be like an elite shot, and I think he will perform well at like combine situations too.
For sure. Yeah. So let's jump to my next guy here. I've got Adama Alpha Ball, who's been
I love.
playing. Yeah, he's been playing in Santa Clara, and like I think there's a chance he makes a first round push. Like
Mm,
I loved him. I did mid-major game of the week where they played Utah State a week ago, and like since then I've spent quite a bit of time on his film, and like I'm super interested. He's got 50, 40, 88 splits right
yeah,
now.
and it
Six seven.
looks
Yes,
sustainable.
yeah. That's the thing with him is like he was always a shooter. But a couple of
Mm,
things happened at Santa Clara. The first is that he's really filled out his frame. Like I think he used to look really skinny,
yeah,
and
he
this year,
looks
like
small at Arizona, and now he looks
yes,
like an actual NBA wing.
yep, he looks like a grown man now. Just from like an anthro perspective, I like how he gets off 1 foot. I like his speed. I think he's like good end to end, and like yeah, he's got that size on him now. The defense like isn't anything crazy, but I don't think it's bad. I like how he uses his feet and his length. I think he contains the ball well. Not like a big playmaker, but a guy who will force bad contested shots. Um, and then offensively, like I just think he's like a real deal shot maker.
Oh yeah,
Hit some big ones from deep, really explosive off one, can finish above the rim, does not mind contact at all. Tough player, but also a really smart player too. Like I think the stuff that he's done with his dribble and his handle, his stuff that like I just didn't really get to show at Arizona, where it's like kind of just stay your spotting up. He's got some shake to him. He can change speeds well. Um, Plays at different speeds. So like when he needs to just like get downhill, he can. But if he needs to hesitate, if he needs to pull back, like he's under control at all times and is able to kind of leverage that to his ability. And he'll also just like play off of 2 feet, keep his eyes up for teammates, find the open man. Like 3.1 assists to 2.4 turnovers. Like, is he turning it over a little bit more than I'd like to? Yeah. But like for a guy to just suddenly have a starring role and only turn it over that much while finding his teammates as often as Adama Alpha Ball has done, like I'm really impressed by it. I think, I mean, like 50, he's 50, 40, 88, and he's 6'7" and athletic. Like, why don't I have this guy in the first round?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
maybe I'm being like a little too simplistic with it. And like, I'm just a little lost in the sauce of like finding a sleeper that I really enjoy, but I think he's awesome.
I think simplifying it to that degree though can like help scouting a little bit to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not. It's less projection in that sense. Like, you're not looking at something that you're like, okay, I want this to be there, and I think it will be there maybe sometime. You're looking at this and you're saying, this is there, and I see it. And with Adama, I mean, it will scale too. Like he had that role at Arizona where he was spot up, but now you see him at Santa Clara, and he's running pick and rolls, and he's isolating, and he's getting to his shots in all these different ways, and it's
Mm-hmm.
working for him. And like I mean, it's going to look good no matter how many touches or possessions he's getting in a game.
Yeah, and I'm gonna throw up this comment from Dirty Dancer. He says he was so passive at Arizona, he will defer an NBA too. I'm not like positive that that's the case. I think sometimes guys like I think guys need stuff to happen to them, and that's like I realize that's like a very broad phrase, but like I just think players develop like as basketball players, but also psychologically in different ways. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes like just getting that reaffirmation of like, hey, look how talented you are. Like you can be the guy is like a thing that can get people over that hump. And
I mean,
I think,
yeah. Look at Brandon Pajemski. I mean,
yeah, sure.
yeah,
Similar
I don't remember
circumstance.
if he was at Illinois the
Yep.
year prior to Santa Clara, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he averaged 2.3 points per game or something incredibly low, and then he comes in and he's like a 19, 10, and 5 guy, or like a 19, 7,
Yeah.
5 guy. You know, uh, he's been awesome with the Warriors so far too.
Mm-hmm.
Like game-winning charge and free throws to seal the game and a couple nights ago. I think. I mean, and that just goes to. I mean, the run that Santa Clara on is just so fun to watch. So many fun prospects with.
Yeah.
But I do think. I mean, as far as deferment goes in the NBA, I just don't see that happening because he has kind of can't come into this role, and it doesn't look like he's ever had a sign of looking back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like I have not, at least in the games that I've watched, like watched a game where it felt like he was rattled. Like even like the San Jose State game, and like I almost wish they would feed him more. Like not to like dump on another player, but like I feel like Carlos Marshall has the ball and is shooting a lot on that team, and I'm like, please give Adam the ball, the basketball.
Yeah.
I think he's a better scorer and a better decision maker. Yeah, like even like in the San Jose State game, it's like 5 assists, 14 points, and it's like a quiet 14.5 assist game where he's still like super efficient. And I don't know, like even when he is like scaling back and roll on this team, I love how it looks, but occasionally he has those games where he just like gets going and he's dominant, like dropped the 23 points in the win over Washington State. Like when he gets going, he is really good. Very, very excited about him. Let's go to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, never mind. I was going to make one last point. The
Yeah,
one
go
game
for
where
it.
I think he was kind of stunted a little bit recently, the one that I've watched is the Ohio State game. I think Ohio State has a lot of long wings, not that are kind of playing. They play a little more forward than wing, but like Evan Mahaffey, some of those other guys that are
Even like
good.
Middleton or a Jamison Battle who's like thick.
Yeah,
Like there's just different
Jamison Battle's
body
like 6'9"
types.
and thick, and he can
Mm-hmm.
move around. He struggled a little bit to get a shot off. I think he had like 11 or 13 points.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't do too well. But the shots he was getting were makeable shots for him. They just got that little extra contest and they didn't go. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the pace that he's at, the 50-48, 88 splits,
Mm-hmm.
I think that is sustainable. I think to some degree. It might come down and might even out, but I think it's sustainable.
Yeah. Well, and he had like the 23 against Washington State, 22 against Cal, 25 against Oregon, 23 against Stanford. Like he is having really good games against high major teams. And like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of thinking he might be a first round guy the next time I update my board. Let's go to Ray J Dennis, who is like your next guy. So Ray J, I always rooted for. He's like from the same like southwest suburb area of Illinois that I'm from. So I've always rooted for him because he like played in like Lombard and Oswego and like the towns around me. Now seeing him at Baylor is always very exciting. What are your kind of thoughts on Ray J? Like where do you see him sort of falling in the pecking order of the draft? Because he is a grad, so like this is it. Like he's going in this year.
I watched a lot of him last year at Toledo because obviously I mean I go to Ohio University, which is in the MAC with Toledo. Had a lot of chances to watch him play. He was like and this is a steep comparison, but he was like the MAC version of Jalen Brunson. Just this smaller guard who can probe in the mid-range area. He has great footwork, and he is dangerous around the rim because of it. Not the most explosive guy, but just such a mistake he just doesn't make mistakes. And it's so fun to watch. And you will listen to the broadcast of those Baylor games, and they cannot stop raving about how well this guy finishes at the rim for his size. I don't know. Let me pull up the half court number for the finishing because I think it's like around 70%.
He's really at the rim this year, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So at the rim this year, he is 63% in that and just overall, but still for a guy who's like 6'2",
that's a high number for like any non-center.
That's a high number. Like we were looking at Judah Mintz earlier, 55%. That's like good for a guard that size. Ray J is about the same size. He's a little more thick, he's a little thicker. He's a little not as bursty, but I think he has got like the better balance.
Yeah.
but 63% is a wild number around the rim, and it shows up that way on film because he's just such a crafty finisher, and he's shooting 40% from three.
Yeah, I have a hard time with him. So he was awesome at Toledo, like straight up, just
20-6 guy.
fantastic. Yeah. I just don't know how well he's going to translate up in terms of speed. And I think even in like high major games, it's like started to show up a little bit. So like I think they've played 7 high major games and he's averaging 4.7 turnovers in those games. And like the assist totals are really high. Like he's still averaging 6.4 assists per game. I just worry about like the finishing I don't worry about, but I worry about like his decision making when the game gets sped up. Because I do think it fades a little bit. And he's another guy where like he's a low volume 3-point shooter and he's never been great at the free throw line. Like last year he was 36.6%, 4.1 a game, which were like both were career highs. This year it's at 41.2, but the volume is down. And like the defense has always just been like fine. Like I've never like had really strong opinions about his defense one way or the other. I think he does struggle to stay in front when it is a guy that's like more athletic. I don't know. He's like a tough nut to crack for me. Like I think there are times where I see the path for him to be like a high end sort of Portsmouth invite who like does really well there and just like picks everybody apart with his feel. And then there are other times where I'm just like, would I rather bet on another small guard that has like something more physical that I can bet on? Like, would I rather bet on the toughness of a Judah Mintz or like the speed of a Donovan Dent or something like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's where I get hung up with Ray J is like, he's just very average from like a physical athleticism standpoint that like everything has to be perfect. Like he doesn't have margin for error with the shot. He doesn't have margin for error with the playmaking because of like the physical curve that he's going to be behind. So that's where I get like a little hung up with him. So do you see him more as like a Portsmouth kind of guy, or do you see him as like, no, for sure he's going like straight to the NBA combine?
I see a path to being a 2 or 3 contract NBA backup point guard. Where he's maybe not getting 20 minutes a game on most of those years, but he's coming in, he's making a solid impact. He's running the second unit, and he's just like not a guy who you're mad at for trying to score, out of the pick and roll.
Yeah.
I think he's getting about 7.5 pick and rolls a game ran for him, and he's like, let me pull up the synergy numbers. It's about 0.8 points per possession, which isn't like super above and beyond, but he's also averaging like 13 assists per 100 possessions, and he's getting 27 points as well, and he's super efficient scoring, and he knows where he can score.
Yeah.
It's just I like the small. Like I feel like the trend I'm noticing is that I like the smaller and kind of more methodical guards a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, not top end speed, but I feel like he plays an NBA style, and I think it's going to be one that either gets him a summer league spot, and I think it's one that'll get him a 2-way contract through that.
So what do you think could get him over the hump that didn't get Colin Gillespie over the hump? I guess would be like my question. Because like Gillespie was a guy who was like really methodical, interesting decision maker, not the fastest, but could like bomb it from 3. And like he still just like hasn't earned those minutes yet. Because like when I look at a lot of these guys that are like 6'1", 6'2", it's like your Craig Porters, like your Devontae Grahams, like Javon Carter, like even like a guy like Kira Lewis who hasn't like super carved out a role yet, but is like super athletic, or a guy like Malachi Flynn who was like really productive in college, or Miles McBride was like big time college defender, huge wingspan, like Peyton Pritchard can shoot the cover off the ball and play make a little bit and can really get up. Like I just feel like Ray J to me, like when I look at the guys that have made it in that mold, like I just feel like the margin for error is so small that like that's why I see him more in that like Portsmouth tier.
I feel like he's arguably the best playmaker or passer out of the guys that you brought up there. And I think it's been unlocked with this Baylor team. There's the offense that they run, because they run such a spaced floor with so many good screeners. And I think he's got every pass in the book. He loves throwing those entry passes. And great. He's a great just passer out of a drive too. Yeah, I don't know. Because those are a lot of names that I think I had around the same range in the draft, which I think Ray J is like a 50 to 70 kind of guy on my
Okay.
big board.
Mhm.
So not like I'm not pushing for like, yeah, he's a surefire draftable guy.
Yeah.
I just really think he's fun to watch, and I think that he probably will get a kind of two-way contract, and I think a high-end outcome is backup point guard on some good
Mhm.
teams.
Yeah, I feel like I want to see where the like turnovers and decision making settle when they get to conference play. Like I think that's going to be like the big thing
That's right, yeah,
is like what's going to kind of
because
swing
MAC
it.
competition is not the same as Big 12 competition at
For
all.
sure. It's tough. Big 12 is tough. Like there's not a lot of leagues compared to Big 12.
Mm.
Then last one we're gonna hit here is Felix Okpara at Ohio State. I'm like a little like confused about Okpara from the standpoint of like I'm not quite sure what the timeline is. Like
Mhm.
I'm
And there are
gonna throw a
rumors about
hypothetical.
his yeah, I don't
Sorry,
wanna
go ahead.
throw anything out there as fact, but there is
Yeah,
rumors
yeah.
about, like, age and him being maybe not 19, you know?
Uh-oh.
Uh,
Yeah, that happens to a lot of guys.
which I don't usually trust that sort of information, but that
I
is something that
I
I
know what
think
you
is
mean.
kept him out of circles maybe silently.
Got it. That's good to know. I yeah, and I think that could like make the hypothetical I'm going to ask you maybe a little bit less of a hypothetical and more something that may actually
Mhm.
happen. So Okpara is 6'11", pretty nimble, filled out a little bit, still on the skinnier side. I think probably around like 220, 230, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's pretty solid.
Ridiculously long, like probably a guy that's going to measure with a very, very plus wingspan. Tough to get around defensively. I think where he's improved a lot this year is like when he does switch down. Last year, I hated him switch down. Like he's one of those guys like profiles as a defender who should be able to switch, and like he would just put his hands all over guys and foul
Mhm.
constantly
Yeah.
anytime he was switched. And like he does still foul quite a bit, but like it's the switching and fouling has gotten a little bit better. But even like in drop coverage, I really like him a lot. He's just tough to shoot over. Really fast hand speed, like just tracks the ball super well and gets the ball really fast. Just a massive deterrent around the basket. He's averaging 2.3 blocks per game, got like a 12.3 block rate, which is outrageous. And he's a guy that can rim run. Like he's finishing really efficiently inside. Does he space the floor? No. Is he a great passer? No. But is he a guy that has fantastic measurables and can run the court and hang with anybody and block a lot of shots? Yeah. And like I look at how many teams in the NBA like you feel like could use an upgrade at the backup center position, and I think he's a guy that has a path to be a long-term player just because he is good at the very basic elements of being a big man.
Mhm.
And if you can talk yourself into a coaching staff getting his defense and like foot speed and like switchability, like technique and that sort of stuff down, then there's a ton to like. What do you think of Okpara? And if he was like, I'm going into the draft today, do you think he's a guy that you would consider drafting, or would he be more in like the Charles Bediako like 2A
Yeah.
tier of like, you know what, I just haven't seen enough offensively. We'll put you on a 2A or an Exhibit 10 and go from there.
I'm definitely seeing to get it, seeing if I can get him on my summer league roster and maybe
Mm-hmm.
get him into a training camp kind of position.
Okay.
Um, he's somebody that you get around the rim and he's going to make an impact. You know,
Mm-hmm.
both ends of the floor. Really, really, really long, like you said, 6'11", 7 foot, probably 7'6", 7'7" wingspan. If I had
Yeah, like it might
put a
be that.
number
Like
on
it
it,
like legit
like
might be like that type of wingspan.
yeah, like it's pretty ridiculous and moves his feet pretty well. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I've seen from him this year that because he was really kind of passive his freshman year as far as like scoring the ball. He will try and seal and seal and seal and seal again on a possession while like perimeter actions are happening, and something will happen out there, and he'll have a lob, you know, and it'll
Mm-hmm.
be great. Uh, and very mobile rim runner,
Yeah.
a guy who you can't forget about in the dunker spot. He's
No, that's where he's been living this year.
yeah, he's been, and especially with the attention that Bruce Thornton and Roddy Gale, who I'm really high on,
I
draw.
like Roddy Gale too.
Roddy Gale's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, those two guys, especially when they can get going downhill, you just you got to commit to them, and that's where Felix has been living offensively. Defensively, he is the kind of ideal kind of rim protector, I want to say. I don't
Mhm.
know if he's necessarily as strong as you want him to be, but I think he
For
does have the
sure.
frame to bulk up. But he can fly around within the paint and make some stuff happen. Like we mentioned how he guarded Dembona
Mhm.
early in the pod.
Yep.
He Ohio State has had he kind of had made Grant Nelson's life trouble when they played
Mhm.
Alabama. Not a super high usage guy, but I don't think you ever really need him to be, you know?
No. No. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be his role. I guess that would be like the other question I'd throw to you is just like because I don't feel like I have. So if you're like, no, that's fine. Do you feel like you've seen anything from him where it's like maybe there's more skill flashes that like could unlock more of like a starter upside to him? Because I don't think I've necessarily seen anything where I'm like, oh yeah, like great. Well, like, and they don't short roll them, so it's hard, like, because they don't really
Yeah.
run any pick and rolls. So it's tough to be like, oh yeah, like he makes these great short roll finds. Like he is such a play finisher because he is just like in the dunker spot. Like, is there
Yeah.
anything that you've seen either like handle or recognition wise that you're like maybe there is more, or do you see him kind of in the vein I do, where it's more just like play finisher
Yeah.
defender?
If there is, there's nothing he's had really the opportunity to show. But
Mhm.
one little wrinkle that I found funny is that I was looking through his film from his freshman year. He took
Mhm.
like 4 threes in the Big Ten tournament
He
out of
did,
nowhere,
yeah,
and it
and
was
like they look
I don't think any
decent.
of them went in, but or I think maybe one of them went in, but it was just kind of out of nowhere, and he shot like 3 threes outside of that, and then he goes and shoots 4 in the Big Ten tournament, and it's I think he had a
It's so
2-3
weird.
in the 10th game out of
Mhm.
nowhere, and I mean, Ohio State went on a run out of nowhere in the Big Ten tournament, and that was
Mhm.
great to see from those freshman guys. But yeah, I if there is anything outside of just dunking and blocking shots and rolling to the rim and screening well enough, I haven't seen too much of it. But uh, closest thing is probably like just the ferocity he has on occasion when it comes to trying to seal off his defender, and maybe
Mhm.
even like do a little of the Steven Adams stuff where somebody's going downhill and he's sealing off the rim protector to get them a better look. He does that on occasion, and I think those little ancillary skills can probably get him on the court, but it's not going to come with the ball in his hands.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting if he is like closer to like 22 than 20.
Yeah,
Because
he's
then I think
I mean,
like yeah,
that's
and
the
I think
birthday that's listed on like Real Gym is to be trusted.
mhm.
He's 19 years old and he's
Okay.
got a little ways to go to
So yeah,
20.
so even if he were to like theoretically be older, it's not like he's like 25. Like it's not a
Yeah,
DeAndre Williams at Memphis situation here.
yeah.
Um, how would you compare him to like I don't know, like a Dayron Sharp or somebody like that? Like obviously like different like body types and play styles, but like
Mhm.
I
I
I
think he's
guess
better
with
than Becker. I think
mhm,
offense on the offensive board where Devin Sharp is like amazing.
mhm,
Um, I don't think he has the frame to necessarily get in and uh, cause that same amount of havoc, but he does get his hand on a good amount of offensive rebounds just by reaching over guys, and being able to jump higher. Um, I like the upside as a kind of rim runner, though. I think
yeah.
that's where his offense can go.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the role. If I like trying to think of like who are other like just mobile athletic guys. Like if I sort like G League like blocks per game leader, it's like if we think he's coming in and he's like a two-way guy.
What do you think about him
Um,
compared to like Kai Jones athletically?
I think Kai is like
Kai's a world-class
bouncier.
athlete, but like
Yeah, but I don't think Kai was like strong or is like physically interested as Okpara is. Like
mm,
Okpara like worked really hard when they played Purdue last year and he had to guard Zach Edey. Like it seemed like he
yeah,
really took on that challenge. Um,
he's taken on some solid big. I mean, Big Ten always has
yeah.
some really solid bigs. Wisconsin's always got a guy or two in there that's going to bang down low, and he
Uh-huh.
held his own.
Do you rather have him or would you
Sissoko for Michigan State.
mhm. Would you rather have if
That's
I
okay.
was like, hey, you're the Chicago Bulls and someone is picking in the second round and and they offer a scenario where it's like, hey, we just drafted Felix Okpara and we don't love it. Would you trade Adama Sanogo for him?
No, I don't think
Okay, so
so.
you'd rather have
I,
Sanogo. Okay, yeah.
I
Sorry,
think
I've like
Sissoko, just the things that you can do, you can throw him the ball, and you're not just like doing it so that he can dunk.
okay, Got it.
I
Yeah,
think.
I like to try and gauge that sort of thing. It's just sort of see, where guys stack up to current guys. Because I think in like some ways it's like he's a cleaner fit than a guy like Sanogo. Like you could probably play him on more teams easily, and I think that has like some appeal. But the skill level is quite a bit different. Like the touch is not the same. Obviously, he's got size on Sanogo.
Yeah,
But like I think that's like
right.
yeah. I don't know. I just think it's an interesting case where like he's so good at one thing that like I think he's a guy that has a chance to come out early that people might not be thinking about. The same way Bediako did last year, but I actually kind of like him better than Bediako. So yeah,
I
that was
think
my last guy. So
the role he's playing for Ohio State is kind of similar to the role that like Derek Lively played last year with Duke.
Yeah.
Just obviously not as like high of an upside as Derek Lively. I think Derek Lively's faster too. Like rolling to the rim, we see that a lot.
He's quicker.
Yeah. I think I think he's a summer league guy. I think he's a guy who can get in there, become a workhorse, and really, I think a coach will really like him. But yeah,
I think there's like way worse guys that got 2 ways last year. That like if he comes out, I think he's gotten 1 at least. Yeah, and like there's just so many like I don't know, just like looking through like guys that are in the NBA right now. It just seems like the backup center position, like there's just there's need for a lot of talent. Like the bar to be a rotation center is high, but you look at a lot of the third centers and it's like, I'm not crazy about a lot of these guys. Like just a simple rim running rim protector is like a guy that I think a lot of teams have a need for. So
would you rather have two-way Felix Okpara or would you rather have year 27 JaVale McGee? You know, like
yeah, that's the thing. Is it's like I like a lot of these guys that just keep getting these opportunities, like these like JaVale McGee's, these like Dwight Howards, like these kind of guys where it's like the name keeps popping back up because there aren't guys ready to replace them in a lot of ways. It's like, man, it feels like there's a lot of opportunity for guys in that mold. So that'll do it. We're gonna wrap it up, Logan. I had a blast podcasting with you. You were welcome back anytime. Give the people a little bit of a reminder. Where can they find you on social media and find your work?
So yeah, Twitter at @LoganA_NBA. Instagram, I don't do a ton there, so I won't shout it out. But Substack is LoganAdamsNBA.substack.com. I also write for a student publication on campus at Ohio University called The Post. At The Post on Twitter, at The Post Athens on Instagram. But yeah, that's about it at the moment. We'll see what we can do more. Yeah,
absolutely. We'll keep up the great work. Everyone at No Ceiling is a big fan of what you put out. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed to our podcast feed wherever you are listening, and make sure that you are subscribed to our Substack, NoCeilingsNBA.com, and follow the YouTube channel. The Tylers and Corey and everybody else on our crew has been putting a lot of work into that, so go check that out as well. Until next time, we'll see you guys later.